Okay guys, here in the shop we got an 02 Saturn LW200, I believe it is. It's got the 2.2 Ecotec. It's a no start. I've done diagnostics on it. You can see part of it's torn apart. We're doing a timing chain on this one. So this is an Ecotec engine, just like the ones that we did on the Equinox, the 2.4s. This is the early version. So you're going to notice some differences. We're doing a timing chain on this one. So we're going to run this video just like we did every other one that we've done on timing chains. I'm doing this one because there's some differences that you guys need to be aware of. The other video works great if you've got cam phasers. This car does not have cam phasers. So I'll tell you real quickly what we got going on here. So this car's got 162,000 miles on it. And the complaint was it was a crank no start. So if you remember the Grand Am video, we have a big plate that goes over the top here. That's our big coil pack. Well, the module in the coil pack was no good, so we changed that out. Then I had to change out the crank sensor, which sits down below where the oil filter sits. So I did that and it started backfiring. So I took the valve cover off. We pull our valve cover off. And we have, I'll pull the valve cover back real quick so you can see what we got. This thing's a bit of a bear to get off. This one has grommets you got to change out. So when we do the valve cover, we're going to put the grommets in it. All right, so you come over here. So we need to get this electrical out of the way. So we're going to have to pick it up and move it to the side. So, all right, so let's get started. We got to get this air cleaner off. So this car, we take that screw loose and we pick this whole thing up and pull it out. Let's go ahead and get that bolt. Get that. Oh, that's a small one. That's the 6mm, the 7mm version. Yeah. This car is grossly out of time, so what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to crank our crankshaft over until we get our timing marks where we need them on the crank or on the camshafts. Because this is camshaft timed, this isn't crank timed. And this is also an interference engine, so depending on how far out of time this car was, she may have a bigger problem on her hands. Set that over there. I'll direct your attention over to this way here. Gotta get this air box out. So it looks like we got one bolt back here. I think that's a 10. It's bigger than a 10. Well, that's because that's a 9. I grabbed the wrong socket. Pull this bolt out of the back. Set it up here so we don't lose it. And this should come up and out just like this. Just like that. Alright, and then you can come over here. You can see our, so we got that same plug that we have in the VVT motor. You can see our cams right here. So we got to get our cams in time, and then as soon as we get the cams in time, then we can go ahead and start doing the tear down here. Just like on the VVT motor, we're going to have to pull the motor mount The belt comes off, the tensioner comes off. I do believe that's all there is to it. And the only difference between that one and the VVT motor is that we have a fuel line in the way. I don't think it's going to be a problem, but if it is, we're going to have to unhook it from the disconnects here. So before that happens, we'll make sure the rail's been depressurized so that we don't get gas in our face. We've already got it unhooked from the valve cover because that's what this is here. So if need be, we can go ahead and take it loose here, and then we can move the lines away if we need to. But I don't think we're going to have to worry about none of that unless that cover gives us problems. So next step, I guess, is going to be we got to get it jacked up and get the tire off. So let me get that done, and then I got to get a 21mm socket for the crank. We're going to rotate the crank over till we get it lined up here, and I'll show you how that works, and then we can get started. So let me get that going, and I'll be right back. Alright, so in order to get it put in time, I got to get the engine dropped. In order to do that, we got to pull that mount loose. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to get this motor mount dropped. While we're at it, we're going to go ahead and get this belt off real quick. So we're going to try. I say this loosely because the center hole of this thing's been chewed. So we're going to try to get our breaker bar in there, and we're going to pull up on this belt tensioner here. See if we can get this belt off this motor. And then what you want to do is you just want to do that with it. Take the belt completely off the motor. There's like 3 or 4 pulleys on here. You can get the belt to come off. This one wants to fight me, as they usually do. Okay. Feels like this one's stuck to the top of the crank pulley. Alright, so this is the one where you gotta take your tool you use. I'm using a 3/8 breaker bar. You pick up on the tensioner, and you can get the belt out. Oh, they use a Dayco belt. That's probably why it works so well. Dayco seems to be the only belt I can ever get to fit these cars. So we'll set the belt up there. And you want to get your tool off, set it to the side. And then we got to get these 3 bolts out here. We got a bolt here and a bolt here, but before we do that, I need to go get my other jack, because we got to put that under the oil pan so that we can be able to move this engine up and down. So I'll go get my other jack. I'll be right back, and we'll start getting this mount out of here. Nope, they're 16. They're 16mm. Which is a first for me, because usually GM does odd numbered bolts. So there's our engine drop that we were waiting on. We're going to go ahead and pull the mount completely off the car, so we need to get in here and get these 3 bolts out of here. Pull this mount out of here. Make sure we don't have a bolt on the side. Sometimes these get stuck, so you want to pull all your bolts out. That way you don't have a problem, and you can tell which bolts go where, because the ones with the washers go on the top of the mount. Set your mount bolts off to the side, and then you pull your mount up and out. Set it on the table. All right, and then we got to jack the engine up or lower the car down, either one. Because we got 2 bolts here we got to get on this main mount. So I'm going to lower the car down because the car's sitting a little high. So we're going to let the car down just a little bit. least get it somewhat level. There we go. That gets us access to these two bolts here. I don't remember what size they were. I think they're the same size. No, I think those were 18s. On the newer Ecotec, these are 18 millimeter, and there's 3 of them. This one, there's 2, and then we'll get the engine in a position where I can access the crank pulley, and we'll get it put in time so we can get it taken apart. Get that one out. That one we're going to have to get with blue. Just like on the other car, we got one we can't get with the gun. We got to get it with blue, so we'll put blue on here. Okay, there's that bolt. Set our mount bolts up there, or we'll never see them again. That should be all the bolts. No, we got one more down here underneath where my finger's at. That feels like an 18 millimeter, so let's see if we can get that one to come out. That should be all the bolts that hold this mount in. It's down here. Alright. You might have to jack the engine up a little bit to get that bolt. If you do, that's why we set the car down low, so that if we had to jack the engine up, we could. Or you can just put your socket on it like I'm about to do. Spin it out with the socket on it. I think we're going to have to jack the engine up. I'm going to have to let the car down a little bit more so I got some more room. There we go. See, this one's already different because the other car we could go up higher with the jack. This one we're doing the total opposite. We're going lower. So we're already doing things differently. Parts might be the same, but how you're getting them off is different. That might be enough to get that bolt out. Nope, we're going to have to put it on the manual. And then manually pull it out of there, and then we're going to have to lift it up and out like we do on the regular version, on the 2.4s. There we go. Bolt's about out, so we can go ahead and see if we can finish spinning this. There it goes. Sorry about that, guys. The camera angle is really terrible on this one. Especially because I'm having to reach through the camera to get to the bolt. Doing my best here, guys. I might have to move you if I keep having problems. There we go. Now I think we can get it out. There's our mount. So what I like to do is I like to take my mount and put my bolts back in where they came from. That way there's no question about where they came from. Alright, continuing with the tear down, we got to get our belt tensioner off. That's a 15 millimeter. So we'll get in here and we'll get this tensioner broke loose. Now we got to get the engine in position, so I'm going to have to let the jack down so we can get, well, yeah, because I don't have a ratcheting 21 millimeter socket or a wrench. So what we need to do now is we need to rotate the engine until our camshafts are lined up and our chain is lined up. Then we can go ahead and pull the crank off, or the crank pulley down here. Get that off, get the timing cover off, and we need to pull that right there. That's a H10, and that thing's in there pretty deep. And then on the back of the engine should be a tensioner. Somewhere on the back of the engine, right back here in the back corner down here. So this one's a little easier to get to than it is on the 2.4s. So let's get the engine lowered down so we can get that timing done. So it's one of the reasons I lowered the car down so far, so we've got room for our engine to drop. Our engine's going to have to drop. That's just the way it goes. And then what I'm going to have you guys do is I'm going to see if I can get you guys to where you can watch that timing marks. Because you're going to need to know this part, because this car is driven off these timing marks. If you don't get this right, the engine won't run. And you can also bend a valve or break a valve off, because this is an interference engine. So that means that the pistons and the valves cannot meet. If they do, it's called a catastrophic failure. Alright, so we're going to zoom you in on that cam pulley right there. That's the intake cam. Now this has an intake, which is that diamond right there, and the exhaust has a triangle on it. That intake has to be at 10 o'clock with a colored chain link on it. So I have to rotate this over until that comes up with a colored chain link. Then we need to check it with the back, which should be on the exhaust, with a similarly colored chain link. And if both of those are in line, we can go ahead and finish it up, because that means the engine's in time. So I got to go get Bertha, and we'll get set up on the crank, and then we'll start getting that time. So I'll be right back. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and get my socket on the crank pulley. This rotates clockwise. Do not rotate this engine counterclockwise or you will damage it. This engine rotates clockwise. You see how low the chain dropped right there? It's part of the reason why we're here. See, there's our exhaust. See, on the exhaust stroke, on this side, you're going to look for this triangle over here. So, come on. Okay, there's our intake. Alright, so we are at the 10 o'clock. There's our chain right there. It's off one tooth. Okay, so we gotta keep going because our exhaust cam hasn't come up yet. We have to be perfect time for both intake and exhaust cam. So we gotta rotate this one more revolution. Alright, so our chain link is right there and it's not in time yet, so we're gonna have to keep going. Get it as close as we can. Come on. All right, let's see. We got to get our camshafts in position. Right now I'm going to do it regardless of chain link color because apparently they're not going to line up. I think we might be further out of time than I thought because our cranks aren't lining up. We might have to manually set this. I'll show you how we do that here in just a second. All right, let's get our intake cam at the 10 o'clock position. All right, so 10 o'clock is right about there. Our exhaust is sitting at the 7 o'clock position, which is way off target. Now, no, I'm sorry, you're supposed to be at the 2 o'clock and the 10 o'clock on the back. So this back cam is way out. That's part of the reason why it's not running. This chain has jumped time significantly. So we may have to bring the, well, because we time everything off the intake cam. So that means that in order to get this in time properly, we're going to have to put the intake cam right where it sits. And then as soon as we get the chain off the front sprocket, we're going to have to rotate the back crank or the back cam to the proper position on the back cam so that when we take it completely down, the top of the engine will be in time, and then the bottom of the engine, when we got the chain off, we can rotate that to the 5 o'clock position, and then we'll be 10 to 5, which is where we need to be. So being that we've rotated this engine, I think 2 full revolutions, and we don't have our chain links or our camshafts lining up, we're going to set it off this right here at the 2 o'clock position. We're going to have to just go ahead and just tear it down. So at this point, we need to get that out of there, and then I'm going to go ahead and pull the crank pulley, and then we're going to start getting that cover off. And then the other thing we need to do is we need to pull the chain guide, the upper chain guide. That's 10mm bolts, so we can do that real quick. Pull your upper chain guide off. Always want to check your kit, make sure you have another one. You should have, because these are wear items. So I'll get this upper chain guide off of here real quick. And if you want, you can put the bolts back in it so you don't lose them. That's how I usually do it. I'll put the 2 bolts back in the, well, actually not this time, because they don't want to go in right away. I'll set them off to the side. This is your first discard item right here, is this, this right here. It's your upper chain guide. That's your first discard item. All right, so let me go get some hex bits. I'll take that bolt out, and then we'll start busting this out. It's going to start going pretty quickly from here on out, so I'll be right back. All right, let's get this bolt taken out. We're going to wait to take the chain guide bolt out until we've got the cover off, because I need to examine the entire system. You take one of these, I think it's an H10, fits right in there just perfect. Now these have got 60 foot-pound of torque behind them, so you're going to have to pull hard. These usually are a pain in the butt to get out, like that. And once you get them loose with the socket, you can go ahead and spin them out by hand, like this. If your kit comes with a new washer for this plug, you want to make sure you get it put on there. or you're going to have an oil leak. Now when we put the plug back in, even though there's no sealer on these threads, I'm going to put some sealant on them. I don't want this thing to leak anytime soon. And then right in there is your upper chain guide bolt. So now we need to get the pulley off. That's real easy. Then we've got all these bolts down here that take off the timing cover. I'm not going to show that part because I've done that before. It's the same on the Ecotec, the 2.4s. They usually go by pretty quick. You got a 13mm bolt that's recessed down here next to the water pump cover. If you're doing water pump, this is when you would do it because you got to have the timing cover off to get to the water pump. So make sure that after you get the cover off, you expect the water pump. So when I'm ready to pull this cover off, I'll bring you back and we'll pull this cover off. So this is the part where I turn off the camera and get some work done. So I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, I got all the bolts out. There is something you might want to know though. The long 13 bolt that goes in the recessed hole down here, you want to pull the nut off the AC line so you can wiggle the line down, and that bolt will fit between the frame and the line. So now you got all your bolts out, we can go ahead and lift this cover up. And this is where I'm thinking we might have issues with the fuel line, but I don't think so because it should pass by the fuel line pretty easily. You got to turn it sideways and pull it up, and there's your chain. There's your timing cover right there in all of its ugliness. Of course, we'll clean this up because that's what we usually do on these. We'll clean that up and put that back together. We got to get that seal changed before it goes back on anyway. So I'm going to take you off the pod. We're going to get underneath there. We're going to take a look at our chain. See if we see anything that sticks out to us here before we tear it down. All right, so as you know, these are a 2-chain system. You got your main chain and then you got a balance bar chain. So we're not messing with the balance bar chain. All right, so it looks like, oh, well, it looks like we've got pretty good everything here, all things considered. All right, so this is your chain that we're gonna mess with right here. What you wanna see is you wanna see that mark right there at the 5 o'clock position. So right off the bat, I know that when I pull this off and tear this chain off, I'm gonna have to rotate this crank till that dot is down here. And then I'm gonna have to get up on the top side and adjust the exhaust cam. So this car is greatly out of time, but this is how you put it back in time. So to do that, we gotta get the chain off. You cannot do this with the chain on because there's just no way to do it. So this is the part where we have to get the big wrench out and put it on these guides right here and rock this back and forth and all that stuff. So I'll go ahead and pull the chain off since, well, yeah, you're going to need to see this so that you know what's going on here. Okay, so we're not pulling the fuel rail. So if you see in between the fuel rail, you got a space right here. That's where you're going to run your socket through. If you're doing this with a wrench, and your He-Man, and you can do that, just straight through the top there would be fine. So let's see, I need to go get my 24mm wrench so I can lock these cams in place. You need an inch, I think it's 1.25 inch socket for that back there. That's your tensioner for the back. After we get the chain off, we can go ahead and pull the chain guides. That's the same as the VVT video, so I'm not going to worry about showing you that. So yeah, I'll get this tore down, and then of course when you take this off, you want to pull the exhaust cam first, and then you pull the intake cam. What we're going to do is I'm going to get the chain off, and then I'm going to set the exhaust cam where it needs to be. And then I'm also going to set the crank where it needs to be off the new, off of the new sprocket. Speaking of sprockets, let's take a look at this for a minute. You see this has got a rubber inside. This is what causes them to fail because this rubber breaks down, causes that center to move, and that's how you get jumped out of time. It's called a cushion, and it's supposed to be to keep your chain from rattling, but the new style of chain does not rattle, so you don't have to worry about having that cushion on there anymore. So I'll get this tore down and I'll be back here in a little bit. All right, so we got it all tore apart, got the old chain off, got the new chain getting ready to go on. Need to give you some part numbers, because those cam bolts are torque to yield, you can't reuse them. So you're going to have to go to the dealership, because they don't have this in the aftermarket. You're going to have to go to the dealership. I paid like 25 bucks for this little pack of bolts right here. And I'll give you a part number here. That is your part number right there. And okay, so when you put the crank and the cam, or put the cam and the intake cam and the exhaust cam bolts, you got to put these in with it. So what I did to avoid confusion was I marked my exhaust cam like this, because they're keyed on the back and these will work on either camshaft. So you want to mark it there, and then you want to mark it, if you've got a spot up here where it lines up, you want to make another mark on there. That way you can put this back together. But I will tell you something, it only goes on one way. So you can't take this and then rotate it 90 degrees and try to put it back on. It won't fit, because I tried. But you want to mark one of your cam gears so that you know which one goes where, because that's critical to your timing. So right now I got my intake at 2 o'clock on the intake side. Back one's lining up at 10 o'clock. I don't know how that happened, because they were way off. But we've got that one set. We set our crank down there to 5 o'clock. I can show you that real quick. It's really easy. You put your pulley back on, and then you rotate it till that woodruff key's sitting straight up. Okay, we got to put our oiler bin. We got our new oiler that goes in there. We got to put our chain guides on. Surprisingly, no damaged hardware. We usually get a little bit. So over there, let's look at this is one of our bolts that goes in our intake chain guide. This is the other one. So on this model, they use the same size bolt. It's not like the newer ones where one of them's normal bolt and one's shouldered. This is your exhaust chain guide bolts. Your oiler's right here. I still got the bolt in it. This is what if it's OE, that's what it looks like for the tensioner, and it matches up with the back chain guide same way. Only other thing I need to tell you guys is that everything torques to 89 inch-pounds except for the cam sprockets, and I will have that torque for you here shortly. And then I think that's about it on that one. You can get to this bolt in between here. You got to kind of slide it in sideways and then stick it through that way. It's good if you use a 3-inch extension to get to it, because you can slide the extensions through there and you don't have to take these fuel lines off. If you do want to take them fuel lines off, you got to have a quick disconnect tool, and then you can take the flexible lines and just kind of rest them up by the computer and you'll be fine. So I'm going to get this thing set where it needs to be, and then I'll show you what it's supposed to look like before we put the cover back on and start getting this thing ready to start. So I'll be back in a little bit. Okay, so we got all of our bolts tightened up. We got our chain in position. Let me show you where we're at with that so that you are aware of what we're doing here. Okay, so that's what your intake cam's going to look like right there. Your exhaust cam's going to look like, I don't know if you can see it too well, but you can kind of see it's kind of like a black colored chain link right there. And then you want to make sure down here on the crankshaft that you're set right there as well. And that sprocket might be hard to push on. It's because of that woodruff key at the top. That woodruff key kind of adds some tension to it, so try to resist the urge to beat that on with a pipe and hammer. I say that just because I know some of you out there is probably thinking that. That bolt in there gets torqued to 89 inch-pounds along with the rest of them. So we got all of our tensioners on. We've got to get our Sprocket's torqued. This one torques 63 foot-pounds plus 30 degrees. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at it like a clock. I found a good graphic online I'm going to use for this. So you're going to use your 24 wrench. You're going to hold it on here on this feature. Then you're going to go ahead and torque it to 63 foot-pounds with your torque wrench. And then you're going to switch over to either a ratchet or breaker bar. You never want to do angle with this torque wrench that I use, the click type, because you can damage it. And then what you're going to do is you're going to make a mark somewhere on here for like 30 degrees. You can probably see my hand better if I did this with it. So you're going to find 0 and you're going to go over 30 degrees. You're going to make your mark on your bolt. And then you're going to just pull your bolt over. And that's just about as easy as it gets. I'll show you what it looks like when we're done. But we're about ready to put this back together. One other thing too, I don't know if this is a common problem on these or not. You want to check your rollers, your lifters here. Make sure your lifters are still in position before you put your valve cover back on. I had one that fell off. It was that one right there. That one was sitting sideways. You want to make sure all those are back on before you put that back together. Normally they don't come off, but this one did for some reason. So, you know, something that we're going to have to look for after it starts, if it's got any kind of unusual ticking or something. So that's a whole other day right there. So I'm going to finish this up to a certain degree, and then I'm going to show you what it looks like when it's all torqued and timed. And then we're going to get our cover back on. We got to change out the seal in our cover, and I've shown you that on the other video, so that's real easy to do. And we're going to start getting the covers back on it and get this thing ready to start. So be back here in a little bit. So I was going through my footage and realized I didn't tape an ending. We got it back together. Okay, I mentioned in the video that we had a rocker off on the intake side. So before I put all the covers back on it and put the coil pack back on and all that other stuff, I went through and put the borescope down each cylinder, and I'll give you a quick overview of what I found. Cylinder 4, where the rocker was missing, was a bent valve. There was contact on the piston from the valves hitting it. Cylinder 3 was clear. Cylinder 2 had 2 bent valves in it because cylinder 2 had full contact. It was piston circles on top, or valve circles on top of the piston. Cylinder 1 was the same way, so she's got at least 3 bent valves in this engine. That's why it wouldn't start, because we have no compression and they're hung open. So of course they're going to be hung open because they're bent. They have no way of retracting back up to where it'll run. So in order to do this engine properly, I would have to take the cylinder head off and then rebuild the cylinder head and then put it back on, and the customer has declined the repair because of the cost. So I wanted to show you that we did get it back together. We did try to start it and it didn't start, which, you know, is sad because we were gonna end the video with the car running. But I got all the belts back on, as you can see. When you're doing the motor mount, make sure you do it like you do it on the other engine, where you get it level before you bolt it down. Now I want to show you something different on this engine. On this engine, we have the fuel lines routed on the passenger side along with that great big wiring harness. On the Pontiac 2.2 Ecotec, everything's on the driver's side. So you have nothing on the passenger side that you have to take apart. So if your car looks different than this, then it's probably because it's not a Saturn. Saturn has to do everything different. So I just wanted to do this real quick so that you guys could see that we got it all done, because the last clip of the video I had all the covers off still and I hadn't put the covers back on yet. Torque values are the same as on the cam phaser video. You want to do 89 inch-pounds on your valve cover and 89 inch-pounds on your timing cover, and you want to do 89 inch-pounds on your coil pack. So There are some dispute over whether or not it's 89 inch-pounds or 18 foot-pounds. I did 89 inch-pounds because I was trying to do 18 foot-pounds, and to me it felt like the bolt was going to strip out inside the cylinder or inside the block, and I wasn't about to have that. But that's what it looks like. It's all done. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions, comment down below, and I hope you found this helpful, and we'll see you on the next one.